in this country and why we are the ones that can surmount those challenges. You see, our mission is so high, we can't get over it. And our mission is so low, we can't get under it. And our mission is so wide, we cannot get around it. In other words, we have to be united. Multiracial, multigendered, multi-generational coalition for justice. We are the 21st century freedom fighters. Hello, somebody. We ready to do this. And so I want you to know that in Senator Bernard Sanders, we have, in the words of Dr. Cornel West, who we have here today, a long-distance runner for justice. Come on now. Come on now. Yes, baby, yes. Now we know that our senator has a vision for this country. This is not just about defeating the worst president in modern history. That's one thing. But you need a leader that has a vision. Somebody that is clear about whose side he's on. And Senator Bernie Sanders is crystal clear about whose side he's on. Hello, somebody. And that when we unite, we must unite based on what is good and what is just. And having Medicare for all is good and just. Hello, somebody. Making sure folks have clean water, hello, Flint, is just. And Flint, I want to say about Senator Sanders that not only did he come here in 2016 when he was running, he came back in 2017. Hello, somebody. And the senator has an infrastructure plan and is committed to making sure nobody in the United States of America has dirty water. Hello, somebody. Senator Sanders understands that there are disparities within the disparities, and in this country, we must have some real truth and reconciliation when it comes to anti-blackness and racism in the United States of America. So when they tell you we can't do this, we can tell them to get the hell out of the way and let those of us who are committed to do it, do it. So I need you to do something for me, Flint. I need you to raise one hand for yourself and one hand for somebody else. The great Dr. Maya Angelou once said, have the courage to stand up for yourself and then the courage to stand up for somebody else. And with these hands, we will have Medicare for all. With these hands, we will have college for all. With these hands, we will cancel student debt. With these hands, we will reform the legal system. With these hands, we will take care of Mother Earth. With these hands, we will have transcendence. And with these hands, we will elect Senator Bernard Sanders, the 46th President of the United States of America.
Thank you. Let me thank you all for coming back, and it's great to be back here in Flint. Thank you. And it is always hard to follow people like Cornel West or Nina Turner. But I want to chat for a little bit, and then we're going to open it up to a great panel discussion, because this is a pivotal and serious moment in American history. And what we're about right now in 2020 is perhaps the most important election, maybe since the Civil War. This is an election which, in a very profound way, will determine the direction of our country. And let me assure you, we together are going to do everything we can to defeat the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country. Donald Trump will be defeated because the American people, no matter what their political view may be, understand we cannot have a pathological liar in the White House. We cannot have somebody who says something today and it doesn't mean anything because he's changed his mind and said something different the next day. We cannot have somebody who is running a corrupt administration. We cannot have somebody who apparently has never read the Constitution of the United States. Somebody who thinks that as president he has the right to attack the media, the right to attack the Congress, the right to attack the judiciary, who thinks that he is above the law and that we should live in an autocracy like Putin's Russia. But we got some bad news for Trump. He will learn what democracy is about come November of this year. Because together we will throw that president out of his office. But it is not just that Trump is a liar and an autocrat. He is a fraud. He is a fraud. Trump in Michigan told the people when he came here that Trump said that he was going to provide health care to everybody. You all remember that? Oh, he believed that everybody had a right to health care. You know what he actually did? He tried to throw 32 million people off of the health care they did have. Trump tried to take away the protections for those many millions of people who have pre-existing conditions. Trump said when he came here to Michigan to campaign in 2016 that his tax plan would not benefit billionaires like himself. He lied. 83% of the benefits of that plan went to the top 1% over 10 years. Trump said, as you all recall, that he was not going to cut Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. He lied. Look at his budget, and his budget calls for massive cuts to Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security. Now, the issue that is on the minds of millions of people is which candidate can defeat Donald Trump. When we began this race, as you all remember, there were 18 candidates vying for the Democratic nomination. Now we are down to 2. And let me just become a little bit political for the moment. Surprise, surprise. Yes, I'll become political. And I want you all to think about this. In order to win here in Michigan against Trump, in order to defeat Trump nationally, we are going to have the highest voter turnout in the history of this country. That's just the simple fact. Trump will have endless amounts of money from his billionaire friends. Trump, because he does not believe in the rule of law, will combine federal agencies into his campaign, use the government to help him. Trump will lie all of the time. And Trump has, in fact, a loyal group of supporters. The way we beat Trump is with a very large voter turnout. And I want you all to think, whether or not the same old status quo politics can generate the energy and the excitement we need to get that turnout to defeat Trump. I don't think so. I really don't think so. I think what we need to defeat Trump is to speak to working people all over this country and to get them to understand that this president lies all of the time. He is not a friend of working families. He is a friend of the billionaire class. We can do that. What this campaign is about is reaching out to young people. The good news is that the younger generation in America today is the most progressive young generation in the history of this country. This is a young generation that is leading the effort in opposition to climate change. This is a generation that is demanding common sense gun safety legislation. This is a generation which is overwhelmingly anti-racist, anti-sexist, anti-homophobia, anti-xenophobia. That is the very good news of which we should all be proud. But here's the bad news. This is a generation that does not vote at the level that it should vote. And our job together is to say to young people, if you want to save the planet, if you want to oppose racism and sexism and injustice of all kinds, you got to get involved in the political process. And this is the campaign. This is the campaign of the future. This is the campaign that is opening the doors to young people all across this country. Young people, come on in. We need you. Now, when you have two candidates and not 18 candidates, it is somewhat easier to differentiate how these candidates stand, what they stand on the issues. And Joe Biden is somebody I have known for a very long time. And what I have said publicly and repeat to you now, if Joe Biden becomes the nominee, I will be there for him. He has made it clear that if I become the nominee, he will be there for me, and that's the way it should be. But there are real differences between us. And that's what democracy is about. You don't have to demean people, you don't have to insult people, but the people have a right to know. What are the differences between the candidates? So let me start off with, I think, maybe the most important. The American people are profoundly disgusted that we are seeing billionaires all over this country buying elections. And that is why, together, we are going to overturn this disastrous Supreme Court decision on Citizens United. And why we're going to move to public funding of elections. Because we believe that democracy is one person, one vote, not billionaires buying elections. Now, in terms of this campaign, it is important to note that Joe Biden has over 60 billionaires who are funding his campaign. Joe Biden has a super PAC. Now, why is that important? It is important because I think people instinctually understand that when you receive large amounts of money from billionaires, you are not, in fact, going to stand up for the needs of working families. Not just the simple truth. That's why in America, the rich get phenomenally richer, while we have 40 million people living in poverty. It's why real wages have not been raised in this country over the last 45 years. Rich are doing phenomenally well, and they buy elections. Now, I want to tell you what our campaign is doing and how we approach funding of our campaign, and I'm enormously proud of this. We have received more campaign contributions, close to 9 million, from more Americans, some 2 million, than any campaign in the history of the United States of America. And that contribution averages $18.50. That means the people who are contributing to our campaign are teachers. You know, they are workers at Amazon, they're workers at Walmart, people who are putting in 10, 20, 30 bucks. And I am very moved and so appreciative of their support. And what all of that ends up meaning is that we are a campaign of the working class of this country, by the working class of this country, and for the working class of this country. We don't need a super PAC. We don't want a super PAC. I don't go to billionaires' homes to raise money. I grew up in a working class household. I grew up in a rent-controlled apartment. I will stand with the working families of this country and take on the power of big money. But it's not just how we raise money. It's what, you know, Joe's been in Congress a long time before he was vice president, and I've been in Congress for a long time. What is our voting record? Who was there when the going got tough? Who was there when you had to take a political risk to stand up for justice? And let me... All of you, or many of you, will remember that when Bush was president, he and Dick Cheney told the American people that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and that we had to get involved in a war in Iraq. I never believed one word of that. I helped lead the opposition to the war in Iraq. Joe Biden voted for the war in Iraq. Of particular interest to Michigan and the Midwest are the disastrous trade agreements like NAFTA and PNTR with China, which have cost this state alone, Michigan, 160,000 good-paying jobs. Cost Pennsylvania 150,000 good-paying jobs. Wisconsin 100,000 good jobs. America as a whole, well over 4 million good-paying jobs. Now, I heard during that period in the 90s, I heard all of corporate America saying you got to vote for these trade agreements, and all of the media saying you got to vote for these trade agreements. I stood with the unions, the working families of the country. I voted against those agreements. Joe Biden voted for those agreements. I understand that there are millions of senior citizens and people with disabilities who cannot now or in the past get by on $12,000, $13,000, $14,000 a year Social Security. You can't do it. Nobody can. I helped lead the effort to prevent cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And my view has always been that you don't cut Social Security, you expand Social Security benefits. Joe Biden was on the floor of the Senate time and time again, talking about the need to cut Social Security. On women's issues, I am very proud to tell you that I have a 100% lifetime pro-choice voting record. It is my view, it is my forever held view, that it is women who must have the right to control their own bodies, not the government. And let me tell you that if it was men who were giving birth in this country, we would not be having this debate right now. Time and again, Joe Biden, on the other hand, voted for an amendment called the Hyde Amendment. And that's an amendment that says that women should not be able to receive Medicaid funding in order to control their reproductive rights. Years ago, and thank God this has changed, and we all should be proud of it, but 25 years ago or so, it wasn't quite so easy to defend gay rights. 25 years ago or so, there was a right-wing piece of legislation called the Defense of Marriage Act. And what that ugly act said, it said, you know what? We believe, this is what the authors of the bill said, we believe that marriage must simply be between a man and a woman. The easy vote was to vote yes on that, because at that time, defending gay rights was not so easy. Joe Biden voted yes on that very bad bill. I voted no. Nelson Mandela made a very profound statement, wrapped up a whole lot of things in one sentence. And he said, everything seems impossible until it is done. You all know what that means? Everything seems impossible until it is done. What does that mean? What it means is we are told by the Congress, by the corporate establishment, by the media establishment, that we really cannot bring about the kinds of changes that this country needs to bring about for working families. We can't think big. We can't think about the kind of world we want to be living in. So my question is, how does it happen that every other major country on earth guarantees health care to all people as a human right? Don't tell me we can't do that. How does it happen that when we give tax breaks to billionaires, Congress never gets around to raising the minimum wage to a living wage of $15 an hour? How does it happen that Germany and Scandinavia and countries all over the world understand that all of their people need a higher education regardless of their income? Why can't we make public colleges and universities tuition free? If we could bail out the crooks on Wall Street 12 years ago, why can't we cancel all student debt in America? If the scientists are telling us that climate change is an existential threat to our country and the planet, how come we are not leading the world in transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy? Think big and not small. How does it happen in the richest country on earth that we have more people in jail, disproportionately African American, Latino, Native American, than a country like China, 4 times our size? How come we tolerate a broken and racist criminal justice system? So when you think big and not small, when you listen to what Mandela says, what we understand, we're going to invest in our young people in good jobs and education, not more jails and incarceration. How does it happen that we have a broken immigration system and we're demonizing immigrants? And there are people all over this country living in fear. And that is why we are going to end the demonization of immigrants. We're going to restore the legal rights of the 1.8 million young people eligible for DACA. We're going to pass comprehensive immigration reform. Almost everybody in America understands that we need strong gun safety legislation. And yet Trump and his friends, the Republican leadership, are intimidated by the NRA. We will not be intimidated by the NRA. So that is where we are at this moment in history, with an enormously important primary coming up in a few days here in Michigan. So there are just a few fundamental issues that we've got to deal with. Number one, the same old status quo politics simply is not working anymore.
That's right.
This is a politics which has failed the African-American community. It has failed the American people. It is a system that works very, very well for all of you who are billionaires. It is not working for the working families of this country.
That's right.
Now, I am told over and over again that all of the ideas and others that I talk about, they're radical, they're extreme. Brothers and sisters, these are not radical ideas. They're not extreme ideas. In many cases, they're being done all over the world, and in virtually every case, they're supported by the American people. So tonight, I am here to ask for your support. Let's win on Tuesday. Let us win the nomination. Let us defeat Donald Trump. Let us transform this country. Thank you all very much. Is there an extra chair here? You got an extra chair somewhere? All right. Thank you. And I'll invite you to the inauguration. Okay, what I want to do now is just have a very informal discussion with some extremely knowledgeable people. This is very informal. We're going to talk about human rights. We're going to talk about civil rights. We're going to talk about the rights of the African-American community and what is happening. We're going to talk about where we need to go as a country. So let me just begin by inviting Naria Sharif to make some comments or do whatever she wants to do. Naria? No, we got one right next to you. Let me have that one back. You take that one.
Everybody, can you scoot towards us a little bit? Yeah. There we go. Let's get it in, Pam.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Naira Sharif, and I'm the director of Flint Rising. And thank you. Flint Rising formed in 2016 in the aftermath of the Flint water crisis, the largest public health disaster in the history of this country. Yeah. And it really formed because we discovered that the state was abusing people under the auspices of our recovery. And I'm tired. Yeah. Like, I'm real tired. Yeah. The struggle is real, and yet we still struggle.
That's right.
It has been 2,143 days since the switch. So that will make you real tired, huh? Yeah. And in those 2,143 days, we have clearly seen that the state and the federal government is incapable of handling any sort of public health disaster. Just last week, the governor, under this new public health epidemic, the coronavirus, made the decision to not have a moratorium on water shutoffs. And our state would rather publish posters and telling people how to wash their hands. Yet you have people who do not have clean, safe, affordable water running out of their taps. Michigan is the epicenter of these water wars, the water affordability war, the water quality war, and the privatization of water war. So I am really hoping, because in Flint we real tired. I have the water warriors, how they fist up, put your fist up, because these are the people in solidarity that we have been fighting for the justice and reparations, and we're continuing to fight for not only clean water, no more water shutoffs, Medicare for all, because we need health care, and we are tired of dragging our poisoned bodies to DC, to Lansing, and all over the country, because we have multiple communities across the country who are now dealing with the same things that we've dealt with since 2014.
Right.
So my question, and I'm going to end with the question, because we want justice and reparations that includes long-term health care, long-term education resources, the repeal of the fascist and anti-democratic emergency manager law that is still on the books, and we need Medicare for all. So my question to you, Senator Sanders, is how could your administration bring fully a recovery? Because we've had Democratic candidates come into our community, and we are tired of the broken promises, and we are tired of Flint being campaign stops and being propped up and talking to reporters when we still are we're overdrawn out of this transactional paradigm. And we really need justice and recovery and clean, safe, affordable water, so we're not being thrown out of our homes because of water shutoffs, and our families being torn apart because of water shutoffs, and us constantly having to prove that we're poor, and all of these policies that are being basically being used to obscure and be obstructions to our liberation and our recovery. So what can you do for us, for Flint?
Okay. I'm going to answer that. I'm going to ask you a question. Am I correct in remembering, and I may be wrong on this, that not only have you had a water crisis in terms of poison in your water, but you're also paying outrageously high water rates? Is that the case?
Yes. And they could even double again this year.
All right. To answer your question, it is a terrible, I will tell you this. In 2016, I was here, and we went and had a private meeting, no TV cameras, with a group of parents whose kids were really suffering. And my wife had to leave. She was with me. She had to leave the room because she was in tears. She couldn't deal with it. And it was one of the most painful meetings that I have ever been to in my life, because I don't have to explain to people here what's happened to the children, the damage that was done to these kids, and to hear parents talking about what happened to their own kids was just terribly traumatic. So to answer your question, what we are about, look, what makes this campaign different is I'm not here just running, vote for me and I'm gonna solve all your problems. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying here is that we have to beat Trump, that goes without saying, but we have to transform this country and fundamentally reorient our priorities. And the only way we do this is through a unprecedented grassroots movement. We are a movement, not just a political campaign, because see, I can come here and tell you all these things, But the only way, and I'm going to stand up here, all right. Because unlike these people, I'm not old, I'm young. All right. Because look, let me tell you something no other presidential candidate will tell you. No president, not Bernie Sanders or anybody else, can do it alone. You want the rich to start paying their fair share of taxes so we rebuild our crumbling infrastructure? We got to stand together to do that. I'll lead the effort. You want to take on the greed of the insurance companies and the drug companies so we pass Medicare for all? I've been fighting for that for 20 years. And when we stand together, that's what we will do. So here is the point. All right, and this is the answer to your question. All right, everything you said, I agree with. I've said it a million times. But what I want to say also, some of you may agree, some of you may not agree. I'm not going to come here and lie to you. Vote for me, I'm going to take all of these problems. I can't do it. You got to take on Wall Street. You're prepared to take on Wall Street? The healthcare industry last year made $100 billion, charging us the highest prices in the world for our healthcare. You're prepared to work with me to take on the healthcare industry? You're prepared to take on the prison industrial complex? All right. That's the answer to the question, that we work together. And as president, I will be proud to lead that effort, but we're all in this together. All right, let me get to Jennifer Epps Addison. Jennifer, your comments, your thoughts.
I mean, first of all, can we give it up for the hometown hero, for Flint Rising, and everybody who's been working on the water crisis? Yes, absolutely. I want to say, beautiful people, first of all, good evening, family. Buenas noches, mi familia. How y'all feeling? I need to let y'all know that this movement is about joy and love and community, so you should feel connected. I got to meet some of you before we started tonight. I see y'all back there. I hope we hit those points. I hope we hit them. I got to meet you in line. Our movement is about community, and you cannot let anybody else define who we are and what we are about. We cannot let the pundits tell us who we are, because if they see this room, they see the resilience and the spirit that the people of Flint have. They see the energy for transformation and for a new world. Only that can define who we are. So we are beautiful, family. So when I say good evening, family, I just need y'all to say, good evening, family. Good evening, family. I love it. I love it. My name is Jennifer Epps Addison, and I have the extreme pleasure of being the president of a national network of grassroots community organizing groups in 34 states, Puerto Rico, and Washington, D.C. And here in Michigan, I am so glad to be sitting with my family, Naira from Flint Rising, and my brother Brandon from Detroit Action. These are our affiliates here in Michigan. I got about a minute and a half, and I want to first tell some truth. I said your family, so I don't want to code my words or sugarcoat. We not only have to take on the corporations and the billionaire class and the pharmaceutical companies, but if we want to transform this world, we must take white supremacy on for real. We have to understand that capitalism and white supremacy are two sides of the same coin. They're not disconnected or disjointed. We have to understand that, you know, I love the spirit of this campaign, not me, us, because Senator Sanders understands that we don't need, and I love my white brethren, but we don't need white politicians to tell us as black people what we need for liberation. Our movements have been telling this country what our liberation looks like for generations. We just haven't had politicians who listen. Please understand, when they call us radical, that in 1964 at the March for Jobs and Freedom, Dr. Martin Luther King already called for the living wage. He said $2 an hour then. Well, guess what? That's 17 plus today. So this $15 an hour minimum wage is a compromise. It is not radical. Understand that. I feel you. Now, I am a queer black woman from the Midwest. I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And so I need folks to understand something about the movement traditions that I come from. Of course, I come from a black movement tradition. That's a tradition that the Black Panthers had a 10-point plan for how we liberate this country. They say we need housing, we need health care, we need education, we need food, right? They had that plan already. I know I come from that tradition. The plan is there. But I want you to also know that we in the Midwest come from a beautiful tradition. They tell us that progressivism can't win in the Midwest. Someone needs to inform them that the Midwest is the birthplace of progressivism. So understand that. Now, we have one critical task, and I want to talk about one thing. Now, look, criminal justice reform, mass incarceration, these are not the only black issues. But understand that our liberation is inextricably linked to a system that exploits and extracts and profits off of the criminalization of our bodies. And it has since slavery. So I want to talk about it for a second, because this has always been the plan. The system is not broken. It is not failing. It is enacted and doing exactly what it is tasked to do. And there was one pivotal moment in my lifetime. I'm 37 years old. There was one pivotal moment in my lifetime where this country had a debate about whether or not we invest in young people and solutions to incarceration and building communities where we can all thrive, or whether or not we were going to allow people to extract and profit off those same folks. And that was in 1994. There was a bill called the Crime Bill. Some of y'all may have heard of the Crime Bill before, but if you haven't, let me just quick tell you what it did. It put billions of dollars into the incarceration and the building of the mass incarceration machine. It told our schools, we're not giving you money for guidance counselors or nurses, but you know what we will give you? Police in your schools. It armed our local, if you have seen the pictures of Ferguson and you see the tanks going down the street in Ferguson, you know what provided those tanks? The funding in the crime bill. And I got to tell you something, family. The author of that crime bill, the author of that bill is now asking us as Democrats to make him the Democratic nominee, and I say hell no. I'm wrapping up with this, brothers and sisters. We did not fight. The movement for Black Lives and Black Lives Matter did not change the consciousness of this country to go back to the status quo, to go back to a time where black people were still not free. We fought for the liberation of our people. And so we need to elect a candidate who understands that the crime bill was wrong, who is going to repeal and replace it. And Senator Sanders has made that commitment to our communities.
Thank you. Great. We have talked a lot tonight about health care is a human right, what it means that so many of our people are uninsured or underinsured. Let me introduce Dr. Victoria Dooley, a strong advocate for Medicare for All single-payer system.
Dr. Martin Luther King said, of all forms of inequality, injustice in health is the most inhuman. Black people, African-American people, have been fighting for the right to not die from illnesses that are too expensive for us to treat since we were freed slaves. They freed us, but they didn't give us hospitals. And then when we got hospitals, they were segregated and they were underfunded. So we didn't have the resources that we need to heal ourselves. So then what happened? When plagues came through our communities and our hospitals were segregated and they were underfunding, what happened? We died. And then they use that as an excuse and justification to say that we died because we were a weaker race. No, we died because they killed us. Right. Fast forward to today. Fast forward to today. With every effort that we've made in this nation to insure more people, whether it be through Medicaid or Medicare or the Affordable Care Act, every single time, there is still a disproportionate amount of poor people of all colors, black and brown people who are left behind, who are left uninsured. After the Affordable Care Act, that black people are still twice as likely to be uninsured compared to white people. And let's not talk about underinsurance. Do you have health insurance if you have a $5,000 deductible and you make $9 an hour? I think not. I think not. So every effort we made to insure more people, we are still left behind. Call me a conspiracy theorist, but I don't think that is a coincidence. So the only way that we can ensure that all people who look like me have health insurance is to ensure everyone. Because if everyone is included, nobody who looks like me can be excluded. And that's the way it should be. So Medicare for all is not just health insurance for all. It is healthcare justice for all. I worked in Flint. I completed my training in Flint. As a family medicine physician, I helped deliver some of those babies who are now subsequently poisoned by lead water. And then what do we give them? We give them Medicaid, which is better than nothing, but it tells everybody that they're poor. And it restricts which doctors and networks they can go to. Everybody doesn't accept Medicaid. That's not justice. Healthcare justice is the ability to go to any doctor, any hospital, any pharmacy, Healthcare justice gives you the choice to go where you want and get the care you need, and without anybody knowing that you are poor or low income because of the words on your insurance card. And when we look at something in this nation like the horrible black maternal infant mortality rate, how black women are 3+ more likely to die during childbirth, what are some of the reasons that contribute to that? It is because we are under and uninsured. And so what are some politicians' answers for this? Where they say, well, hey, let's give people Medicaid for an extra year. That's insufficient. We need health insurance our whole lives, not just when we're pregnant and the year that we're after we're pregnant. So here comes Senator Bernie Sanders. And he says that Black lives matter so much to him that he is the only candidate who believes that we all deserve health insurance our whole damn lives. I know there's a couple people here, but I have some questions for the audience. They're rhetorical. If Black lives matter, doesn't our student debt matter? If Black lives matter, doesn't our health care matter? If Black lives matter, doesn't our ability to afford college matter? You see, Senator Sanders is not here to pander. He's here to provide answers to the problems that we are suffering in this community. He's here to cancel student debt. He's here to cancel medical debt. He is here to make public colleges, universities, and HBCUs free. They are public. You don't pay to walk down the public sidewalk. You don't pay to go to the public library. You shouldn't have to pay to go to the public college. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dooley. U.S. Senator Don Regal served in the U.S. Senate as one of the most progressive members of the Senate, coming here from Michigan. He served from 1976 to 1995. Please welcome Senator Don Regal.
I'm one of the few people here that's now older than Senator Sanders. So I want you to know we're counting on the young guys like you to lead us ahead. This group of people, I was so honored to represent Flint for 28 years, 10 years in the House and 18 years in the Senate. And this is a community, this is a special community, and I want to just cite one fact as a proof of that in terms of how we're really one family. We talk about that, this community, more than any other you'll probably visit in the whole country, represents it. And here's the proof point. Back many years ago, this city of Flint elected an African-American mayor, Floyd McCree. He was the first mayor, African-American mayor, elected in a major American city, in a city that at that time was majority white. So we've crossed lots of barriers over a period of time because we care about each other here. And a basketball team like the Flintstones are named for this community because the 5 players from this community championship. But this is who is here in this room. And you can look around and you will not find a more diverse, together community of people who care about each other and who come out of the history of this community in terms of establishing union rights with the sit-down strikes with the UAW workers. We have some union families here. We have some union family members here. What have the unions done for us? The unions brought us health care, brought us pensions, until the strip mining came along with the bad trade deals and took all of our jobs to other countries. You know, Bernie stood up against those trade deals, and so did I. I led the fight against NAFTA in the Senate. He led it in the House. Since it started, just to give you one figure to have in your mind, our net trade deficit, and this represents jobs, not just dollars, since NAFTA started in the favor of Mexico and against the United States is now $1.2 trillion. Now, if you think about what that amount of money leaving our country does in terms of strip mining, cities like ours here in Flint, Genesee County, and across Michigan, it's tens of thousands of jobs. It's hundreds of thousands of jobs, not just the union jobs who are making the cars, but it's all the other related jobs to it. So votes matter when they're cast. He was with us against NAFTA. He's the only candidate left in this race who was with us against NAFTA. That counts for something. That counts for something. Do you know what the minimum wage is now, the federal minimum wage in the United States? I'll tell you, you'll be shocked. You'll be shocked. And we should be ashamed as a nation even to have to speak this. It's $7.25. That's the national minimum wage. $7.25. That's a kind of an economic sickness. And when you look, as Bernie has pointed out, the way the wealth is going up to the top of the income scale, he's made this point, and I'm repeating it here so that you have it in your minds when you talk to your friends and your neighbors and relatives before the vote on Tuesday. There are 3 families in the United States who now have more wealth than the bottom 162 million Americans in our population. Those 3 families have that much wealth. So the system is not working the way it's supposed to work. That's not fair. It's not equalitarianism. It has to change, but you've got to have a change agent. You've got to have somebody that's willing to say it and challenge it and lead it. You've got to have somebody like this. You've got to have a leader that's willing to say it. And you've got to have a leader that won't take the poison money, won't take the sewer money from the big money PACs. He won't take it. He won't take it because he knows it's wrong. But he's the only candidate that won't take it. And what has happened, he's proven that you can actually publicly finance an honest-to-God, fair people's campaign because the people will finance you if you're on their side. On their side. On their side. So it's time to figure out who's on your side and whose side you're on. And here's somebody who's on our side here in Flint. Now, Bernie often says, and I believe it because I've seen it in his votes and I've seen it in his conduct, he's fighting for economic, social, racial, and environmental justice. And these are all things that need major fight. And we're talking and focused here tonight specifically on racial justice, the racial justice part. And everybody's spoken so beautifully about how it's affected the healthcare system and all through our government. But if we get him elected, and we need to get him elected, and he puts a cabinet together around that cabinet table, I know and we know that we need to have that cabinet look like this room of people. I want to see everybody. I want to see all these people. I want to see all these racial groups, and I want to see all these ethnic groups around that table and bringing the truth around that cabinet table and get rid of those people that are there today who are working against the common good of the country. And we see it all the time. So in terms of mass incarceration, we know the damage it's done, and you've spoken so powerfully as to what it's done. We know how many young blacks and brown people and others have gone because of convictions on marijuana or drug charges or what have you. It was like stop and frisk in another form. We just got rid of the stop and frisk guy. He's out. He's out, but he's back. He's out, but he's not out. Because when you got $65 billion to spend on behalf of the candidate that he wants, that's not the candidate that's going to be the candidate for you. The candidate we want is standing right here. And there's only one that's going to stand up for you, for this country, for all the people who give the $18 a bucks on average to the campaign. So the question is, how do we handle this case of young people of color that were sent to prison, have prison records, we've just seen Trump pardon some of his buddies, some of his friends, some of the most disgusting people you'll ever see. And he's promising to pardon more. What do we do about the young people of color that have been sent to prison for reasons that never should have been the case? How do we get them back into our society? How do we clean up their record? I know you want to do that. Tell people what's going to happen.
I'm going to discuss that in a moment, but I want to say one thing that we're going to do. First of all, we end the so-called war on drugs, which, as Don said, has been so destructive. Turns out, as you know, there are some things you can do with the stroke of a pen through executive order, other things you need legislation. Turns out you could legalize marijuana in every state in this country through executive order. That's what I'll do. Turns out, Don, that there's already an incipient movement that we have to expand to expunge the records of those who arrested possession of marijuana. And in hearing from people all over this country, people are saying, Bernie, that's great. You want to legalize marijuana? That's going to happen. But we don't want the entire marijuana industry to be controlled by a handful of large corporations. So what we have proposed is to invest in those communities who have been hardest hit, the African American community, Latino, Native American communities, help them start businesses to create jobs through the legal and make money through the legalization of marijuana. Let me now go to Brandon Snyder, who's the director of Detroit Action. Brandon.
This on? Yep. All right, so what up, though, Flint? Nah, y'all are from Flint. Y'all know the response to that. What up, though? So, my name is Brandon Snyder. I'm the director at Detroit Action. We're a community-based, grassroots, member-led organization building the political power for working-class black and brown folks in Michigan. So our fights are similar to those to those of Senator Sanders. We fight for good jobs, good neighborhoods, good schools, and ending mass incarceration that we see in our cities and we see in our country. So, like many folks, I grew up in the city of Detroit. I grew up in a working class neighborhood where my grandparents moved to Michigan back in the late 30s and back in the 40s from Georgia and Alabama to escape white terror in the South. just like a lot of folks in this room, moved up from the South, moved up for the promise of good jobs, moved up for the promise of jobs in a factory where you can live the quote-unquote American dream and take care of a family by working an honest day's work for an honest day's pay. And my parents and my grandparents and many of my family members worked on the lines in Detroit, worked at the Big Three. My dad is a security guard. My mother is a janitor. And then growing up in the late 80s and 90s, in the neighborhoods that I lived in, we saw families and we saw houses where people were able to live and take care of their children. But the Detroit I grew up in now, or that children younger than me grew up in now, is devastated by blight, devastated by the foreclosure crisis, where Detroiters were overassessed $600 million. Devastated by a lack of access to quality health care. Devastated to closing schools done by emergency management, by austerity, by crumbling infrastructure, and by billionaires like Dan Gilbert, like Mike Ilitch, who've come in and tried to decide and make decisions on what our politics looks like while buying up all of downtown. And that ain't right. So we know the city is different. We know that development is happening to benefit the wealthiest of these and not the folks that's in our neighborhoods. We know that the same things is happening right here in Flint, where people are coming in and taking advantage of the auctions, taking advantage of the tax auctions that while people are losing their homes, the water shutoffs. We know that folks are preying on our families and ensuring that they can benefit while our families live in pain. And we know that the housing crisis that our family members and that our friends and ourselves suffer from comes from a long line of white supremacy in our policies, from redlining to inclusionary discrimination, and as well as to predatory lending. We know that these policies were white supremacists and led to extract from our communities, extract wealth, and leave us at the disadvantage of those wealthy individuals and corporations and banks that have harmed our communities for the last decades and for generations. So Detroit Action is fighting back. Our work isn't about just waiting until Election Day. It's about building that type of movement that we need right now that sees black and brown workers, black and brown young people, black and brown folks that have been formerly incarcerated, and black and brown folks that have been formerly homeless have a voice in the political process. We know we got candidates like Vice President Biden that have not supported development in our neighborhood. They have not supported the type of resources and materials that we've needed. Vice President Biden does not support a housing guarantee. No. Instead, what he's done is invest through the 94 crime bill and mass incarceration in our communities that's extracted our family members and friends and taken from our neighborhoods and placed families in disarray and in havoc. We know that we need somebody that will fight for big change, for real change. And what we need is that revolution to start with our members and with our families here in the city of Flint, here in the state of Michigan, right now and right today. So I just want to end on a question. So Senator Sanders, so how does your housing justice plan, correct the generations of white supremacist policy that we've seen in our housing, that's caused the devastation in our families? And what do you do to make sure that black folks are having access to opportunity here in Michigan and here throughout this country? Thank you.
Thank you. We have a housing crisis in Michigan impacting African Americans. We have a housing crisis all over this country, including gentrification, including homelessness, including 18 million families, many of them black, who are spending half of their incomes for housing. All right, so it's not just homelessness, where you got 500,000 people sleeping out on the streets tonight. That is an unbelievable tragedy. But you got 18 million people spending half of their incomes for housing. What do you have left to take care of your family with? So to answer your question, we will build 10 million units of low-income and affordable housing. I grew up in a family that lived in a rent-controlled apartment. We will tell landlords all over this country, you cannot raise rents 10, 15, 20% every year. What I want to do now, I want to ask my friend Dr. West. You all know Dr. West. Cornel West is one of the great writers in this country. He teaches at Harvard now. And he is also the author of a book, a very profound book on Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called the Radical King? That was the name of it, yeah. And what I want to do is, this is what I want to ask Dr. West. Dr. West, there was a headline in today's Detroit news. And the headline said, Biden sees advantage with Michigan black voters. Okay? And the headline talks about how there's polling that suggests that Biden will do well with black voters in Michigan, in fact, all over the country. I want to ask you this question. In terms, and we heard a lot of this discussion this evening right now, in terms of what's going on with the African American community, where the wealth gap between whites and blacks is 10-1, where unbelievably, I mean, really is unbelievable that in the wealthiest country in the world, 1/3 of African American kids are living in poverty, where we have a life expectancy for African Americans that is 3.5 years lower than for white families, where we have a situation where black workers today are making about 76 cents on the dollar compared to men, and for women that number is substantially lower, where, as Dr. Dooley was talking about, we have 4 million African Americans who are uninsured entirely, and even more underinsured, where black women are 3.5 times more likely to die from pregnancy than white women, where we have home ownership gap between black Americans and white Americans today is wider than it was in 1900, where we have an education system. Years ago to Detroit, you got school buildings that are crumbling, you got teachers that are leaving, you got young African Americans leaving school very deeply in debt, and others cannot afford to get a higher education. Now, my question to you is Dr. West, do you think that the same old status quo politics, the politics that depends on billionaire campaign funding, the politics that get support from Wall Street and the insurance companies and the drug companies and the fossil fuel industry, which, by the way, is also polluting and destroying black neighborhoods, giving kids asthma at outrageously high rates, all right? Dr. West, do you think, given the reality of the condition of the African American community right now, that supporting a status quo, same old type of politician is going to address these issues?
Oh, appreciate that question, Oh, indeed. You asking that kind of profound question, I got to stand up and straighten my back out. Brother Martin used to say, anytime, every day, people straighten their backs up, you're going somewhere, because folk can't ride your back unless it's bent. And I'm not allowing nobody to ride my back. Not at all. But I love you too. But you keep in mind, you see, that when you see me, you see my mama and daddy, you see in my tradition, my community, you see in Dee Dee Bridgewater from this town and the Betty Carter from this town. But you're also seeing some Michael Moore in me, because it's just not a skin pigmentation matter. Skin pigmentation doesn't determine your moral and spiritual formation. You got to decide who you are. And the reason why I'm with this brother, and I've been with this brother, and I will be with this brother, that's why Brother Danny Glover and I came yesterday and had 11 events in various senior citizen sites. That's why I'm going to be with him all the way through, is because we are experiencing a massive moral and spiritual collapse of integrity, honesty, and decency in the country. And I don't care what color you are. I don't care your gender. I don't care your sexual orientation. It is a moral and spiritual crisis. And this dear brother, my dear brother Bernie Sanders, exemplifies an integrity, honesty, and decency. Do you know how rare that is in the political class when most of them are up for sale? They're up for sale. They tied to big money in all of its various forms. When they ask what are their deepest moral convictions, they got to ask what the latest poll is saying. You don't have to worry about that with this brother. He's never, ever up for sale. That's who he is. That's the kind of brother he is. Let's just be honest about it. That's right. And we're not saying that he's God. We're not saying he's a deity. You know, you say this and the corporate media will say, oh, he got a little cult of personality. It's clear that Brother West has a deep love for Brother Bernie Sanders. Yes, the love is real, but it's brother to brother. We here to be able to keep him accountable as he provides leadership and vision in a moment in which we're about to lose American democracy. We're about to lose it. And you have to ask inside of your own soul, are you going to sacrifice? Or are you going to turn things around on Tuesday? Or are you going to commit your life to something bigger than you? This brother comes out the greatest borough in America, namely Brooklyn. And there's a rich Jewish tradition that comes out of Brooklyn that tells the young brothers and sisters part of the genius of Hebrew scripture, whether you were religious or secular, has to do with hesed. It has to do with steadfast love. And justice is what love looks like in public. You are to focus on the orphan, the widow, the motherless, the fatherless, the oppressed, the persecuted, the subjugated, the dominated. That is a moral and spiritual force working through the soul of Bernie Sanders. What it is. It's his mama inside of him. It's his daddy inside of him. It is his intellectual and political commitment, and we are at a pivotal moment. That's why he's unprecedented in American history. That's why this campaign and movement is unprecedented. We got three choices. We got a neo-fascist gangster in the White House. And when I talk about gangster, I'm not talking about hatred. I'm not talking about hatred. I'm a Christian. I believe in charitable Christian hatred. Oh, yes. Well, you hate the sin, but you still try to love the sinner. We hate injustice. We hate exploitation. We hate domination, but we can stay in contact with the humanity of others. That's one reason why Brother Bernie is able to stay in contact with the humanity of all of those who disagree with him. You see how he began this thing. That's the kind of brother he is. That's what we love about it. But at the same time, he's on fire against what ought to be hated. Injustice. I don't care what color you are. I don't care what gender you are. If it's wrong, if it's oppressive, you have to take a stand. That's why we got to be part of this campaign and this movement. And let us be very clear in terms of our context as it relates to black people. When I say neo-fascism, I mean the rule of big money and big military with a strong man who will scapegoat the most vulnerable so that we cannot come together and confront the most powerful. A disregard of rule of law, a demonizing of the weak and the vulnerable, the exact opposite of Hesed. But then we've got the second choice, which is a neoliberal centrist. Oh no, we can just boo for the policies. We can boo for the policy. We got to be clear what the choice is. Because the neoliberal centrist is still tied to big money. That's the billionaires that's tied to the brother. They still tied to big military. That's why he can support the invasion and occupation of Iraq and not just support it, brag about it. Martin Luther King Jr. said militarism, materialism, racism, and poverty, they're going to suck the very juice out of democracy. So this is a global, this is an international affair, because a baby in Ethiopia and Guatemala, a baby in Argentina, a baby in Flint, a baby in Tel Aviv, a baby in Gaza, a baby in Chile, and a baby in Mississippi have exactly the same value, exactly the same significance. That's what Bernie Sanders understands. That's what he represents at the heart of who he is. When you're a neoliberal centrist, you can lip sing fairly well some of the progressive themes every 4 years. But like Milli Vanilli, we want the real thing. Bernie Sanders is the real thing. We want the real thing. Isn't that true, Sister Nina? We want the real thing. We're not degrading him as a human being. We're talking about the qualitative break because the neo-fascist now in the White House and the neoliberal who all of a sudden now is coming back to life. Coming back to life. And the catalyst was my own black people. Oh, I'm so disappointed. Oh, I'm so upset. I think about the legacy of Frederick Douglass and Ida B. Wells Barnett. I think about the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. I think about the legacy of Ella Baker. I think about the legacy of A. Philip Randolph. They always said, focus on the least of these. What are you doing for the poor and working classes? There's no other campaign that represents that better than Bernie Sanders. No other one. No other one. Brother Bernie. That's right. So then, but then the question becomes, why not the third option? And keep in mind, Brother Bernie's running on a progressive neo-populist platform. He and I are democratic socialists. It's not a democratic socialist platform. It's building on FDR. It's building on Martin Luther King Jr., who also was a Democratic, but he's not running on that. So all the lies about socialism and communism, keep track of the moral and spiritual spirit and fire of what Bernie is doing. Don't get caught in the isms. We're talking about the preciousness of poor and working people. But my last point is this. When it comes to the chocolate side of the country. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. No, I got a deep love for my black people. I wouldn't be standing here without black love, without my mom and my daddy in Shiloh Baptist Church and Willie P. Cook, my vacation Bible school teacher. And I say, what has happened that first black leadership itself has become so open to just money and status, rather than bearing witness to a justice that makes them over against the status quo. Black people historically have always been the most progressive community in the history of this nation. 244 years of white supremacist slavery, 100 years of neo-slavery called Jim and Jane Crow. We've been on the cutting edge, but since the 1940s, since 40 years ago, all of a sudden we got a wave of black middle-class folk who think that somehow their access to opportunities is the measure of black progress rather than Precious, Shaniqua, and Jamal on the corner. So they didn't really zero in on the mass incarceration regime. They don't talk about the decrepit school systems in the hood. They don't talk about inadequate housing. They don't talk about not enough jobs with a living wage. They don't talk about the need for Medicare for everybody. That's going to disproportionately help black people and brown people and red people. What has happened to our black leadership? Some of them just sold out. Other ones have just given up. And the rest of them, they're so scared, they're so addicted to the familiar, they don't want to step out on the best. They want to settle on the mediocre and the middling. I'm going with the best of America. I'm going with Bernie Sanders.
Well, I think Dr. West answered the question. And let me just pick it up and thank the panelists for all of their fantastic, not only being here tonight, every single one of these people is working to create a better Michigan and a better America. They have taken on powerful special interests their entire lives, and I thank them all. But I want to just conclude on this. I can't quite pick up what Dr. West did. I don't have that ability. But here's what I get back to. I get back to the fact that every day we are told by Congress, we are told by the pundits, we are told by the media what we can do and what we can't do. And I think it's time we went into our own hearts and determined what we can do. I live 50 miles away from the Canadian border. They guarantee health care to every man, woman, and child. You leave the hospital, no bill, their life expectancy longer than the United States of America. If the Canadians could do it, if the Europeans could do it, if the Scandinavians could do it, the United States of America could do it. Don Rigo mentioned the outrage, the immorality of 3 people in America owning more wealth than the bottom half of our country. We got people in Michigan and Vermont working 2 or 3 jobs. Don't tell me that we cannot create an economy that works for working people, not just billionaires. Don't tell me that we cannot invest in our young people, Black and Latino, Native American, and create the jobs and the opportunity they need to thrive in life. It costs less to send a kid to the University of Michigan than to send that kid to jail. Let's send them to the University of Michigan. When we are spending billions and billions of dollars building nuclear weapons of every kind of advanced Western weapons system, we got schools in Detroit, in Michigan, and in Vermont that are crumbling. How about investing in our kids, in our schools, not just in weapon systems? We could do that. So what this campaign is about, and I'm not quite as articulate as Dr. West, but what this campaign is about is understanding a few basic things. If we are prepared to imagine a different future, we can bring about that future. If we think that we have to continue working for slave wages, you're going to continue working for slave wages. If you think you don't deserve health care as a right, you're never going to get health care as a right. If you think that climate change and the destruction of the planet is inevitable, and that there's nothing we can do about it, that's exactly what will happen. Now, at the end of the day, and I know a little bit about this, Don Regal knows about it, we all know about it. The 1% is very, very powerful. I deal with them in the Senate every damn day. I deal with their people who they elected. I deal with people who say, oh, we can't raise the minimum wage. We can give tax breaks to billionaires. We can't build affordable housing. We can put billions into the fossil fuel industry. We can't deal with homelessness and do the issues that we have to because we don't have the money, they say. So what we have got to do is understand that at the end of the day, the 1%, they're very powerful. No buts, ifs and buts about it. They have endless amounts of money. You saw what Bloomberg did, just as a perfect example. Guy said, hey, you know what? I'd like to be president of the United States. Well, a lot of people would like to be president of the United States, but he proceeded to try to buy the election. Spent $500 million. And by the way, that's just a fraction. That's a tiny fraction of his wealth. Doesn't matter. What's $500 million when you're worth $60 billion? And it's not just Bloomberg, it's other people who put money into people's campaigns. All right? What our understanding must be is that the 1% is very, very powerful. They control the economy. They control, to a large degree, our political system. They own the media. That's the facts. But at the end of the day, the 1% is 1%. And if we do not allow Trump, don't allow Trump to try to divide us up based on the color of our skin, based on where we were born, based on our sexual orientation, based on our religion, based on our gender. If we don't allow Trump to divide us up, if we stand together around an agenda that works for all of us, and you've heard some of that agenda here tonight, there is nothing that can stop us. When people stand together at the grassroots level, that's how change takes place. That's what everybody here is saying. We all know that. All right? And that's what we've got to do. So Tuesday is a very, very important election. Very important. I'm here to ask for your support. I'm asking your help to win the Democratic nomination. And together, I'm asking your help to defeat the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country. Thank you all very much.